Streaming is okay. Just say.
We're streaming. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we're streaming. All good. Yes, we are streaming.
So we're streaming live on YouTube. This is the Making Learning Stick webinar. It's about 5 minutes before starting time, so we'll be back with you in 5 minutes.
I will now open, so you should take down the presentation.
Hi and welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, who's that?
It's Karen. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. I don't have video and I'm not seeing all the names. I need to turn on my participant box. There we go. Good. Hi, Karen. I'm going to be seeing a lot of you in the next few days, aren't I?
You are.
Right. Thanks for being here. Good.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks. Good. So we also have a few other people, Arona Faye Rochelle and Philippe and Karen Ali.
Yes.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
I think it'd be great if you guys would, in the chat box, just write your name and hello if you want and where you're dialing in from. Welcome, Noella. I see some familiar faces coming in.
Hi, Laurie.
Hello, how are you doing?
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again too. Well, I saw you for a brief moment there.
Yeah, I'm struggling with my Zoom background here. Just a second. I'll join you visually in just a moment.
Yeah, that's okay. And Dinoa, am I saying that right? Hi, welcome. I'd love it if you guys would put in the chat box just a name, where you're calling from. It's just lovely so you can see where others are calling from. And welcome, Claire. And you can have your video on, video off, however you like. We're not expecting hundreds of people today, so it might be a cozy group. And welcome to the Making Learning Stick webinar, part of our Neuroscience Made Simple series of webinars. I'm curious if people have been here before. They recognize a couple of familiar names. And so we've got, let's see, Karen from Cologne, Karen from near Preston, and Frodo saying welcome to everyone, and Claire in Cornwall. Hello there, Claire in Cornwall. Noella from Bucharest, and Ainoa from Frankfurt. Yeah. Okay, well, it's 4 o'clock UK time. It's time for us to get started. So I'm just going to jump in. I know people will be coming in, and it's all good. So let's see, how do I want to organize my screen here? Okay, so I've got some slides. You should be seeing slides, yeah? Those of you whose faces I can see. Hey, Magda, good to see you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Glad you could be here.
Me
So,
right. Very much.
Good, good, good. Okay, so this webinar is about making learning stick. Now, there's a lot of ways to think about making learning stick. What kind of learning environment are you in? And what we're going to be paying attention to today is that one-to-one situation, as if you're a coach or perhaps a leader in an organization or someone who is working with people one-to-one. So this isn't about training design. We can talk about that a little at the end, but this isn't so much about training design as it is about how does the brain work around learning? What does it take to learn? What are different, Frodo, could you mute everybody? Actually, I can do that. So everybody's on mute, just so you know. Yeah, so it's the one-to-one situation. How does the brain work? What's going on with learning? And of course, you can apply that to larger situations, but let's focus on one-to-one if that's okay. So here's what to expect in this webinar. We'll look at what do we mean by learning. So I've partly oriented you to that, but there's a little bit more that I'll say about that. How the brain learns, specifically what's going on in the brain. There's different memory and learning areas in the brain. And then there's some tips for how you can support others to learn. And we'll have an interactive activity, of course, where you get to talk to other people and talk about how you will help others learn in your work and life. And then we'll come back to a whole group and do some just summary of takeaway and tips. And we'll be, of course, telling you about a course that we're running where we practice all of this stuff about how people learn. And a little time for Q&A at the end. Okay, let's go. So what do we mean by learning? A lot of times, I think you could even put into the chat box, what do you think of when you think of learning? Even though I've been working in the field of learning for over 20 years, I still think of learning as like I can read a book and learn something. But where I want to point your attention and shift the conversation a little bit is not just that cognitive learning, like, oh, I learned some facts, but how do you learn in terms of changing behaviors, acquiring a new behavior? So if you're coaching or you're leading someone and you're helping them learn something, it isn't just about relaying a few facts to them. Oh, in order to do this thing, you need to do A, B, and C. That might help, but there's a lot more that goes into them actually learning, as in, I'm going to embed this set of concepts, do something with it, and change my behavior. So when we talk about learning in this webinar, we're really talking about how do you help someone change behavior? How do you help them adapt and do something new and different? And so we'll be talking a little bit about habits. How do you embed things enough that they become a habit? And if you use that learning step, I'm not going to be doing learning steps here, but a lot of people know that you embed learning so it becomes unconscious. It becomes unconscious, automatic. So if you learn to ride a bicycle or drive a car or learn a new mobile phone, There's the learning process, that uncomfortable learning process, but after a while, it's just automatic, embedded, second nature. And so that's what we're aiming for, is how do you get something to be second nature? Okay. And so things people have said about learning, open to new ideas and able to implement them, creating new understanding. So that's part of it, absolutely. Undoing the things the way I did them before. Yes, a lot of learning is about unlearning and undoing and redoing. So there's some extra effort required if you're learning something a different way than you've done before. If you're learning something completely fresh in a brand new world, you're young and open and naive about being, something, it's easier actually. But if you're relearning how to do something, it can be harder because you have these old neural pathways that get in the way because they're old habits. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something to know when you're learning that you've got to undo some of that. Okay, let's get on with our brain areas. So 3 types of memory. So let's just, if we can, agree that if you're going to learn something, it requires some kind of memory so that you remember how to do it. You have it. Second nature is a type of memory, and cognitive, you can repeat things back. That's a type of memory. So we're going to be working with 3 different types of memory. I'm not going to use super fancy names with them. A little bit, but not a lot. So basal ganglia, that's about as fancy as we get in terms of brain areas. Basal ganglia, this is that's actually a plural. There's a number of parts of an organism that work together in your brain that contain your long-term memory. So riding a bicycle and driving a car, all those things you know how to do automatically in second nature, they live in your basal ganglia. And it's a very fast recall time. So you know how to do something, it can be that snappy and you don't have to consciously think about it, which is why we call it second nature. Then there's another brain area, which is actually located in a slightly different place. It's called the episodic as in episodes, as in experiences. So that's your experiential memory, and it is stored with emotion. So I'll come back to these one at a time and give you a little more information about them and why they matter when it comes to helping someone learn. And then there's semantic memory. So semantic meaning having to do with words, and that means facts and information. So if you're learning, let's say, for example, you're learning to ask open-ended questions. A lot of you are coaches here or leaders who may have learned some coaching skills or communication skills. Open-ended questions are a really helpful skill to have. So if you've learned that skill and it's second nature to you, you don't have to think about how do I ask an open-ended question. It's straight in your basal ganglia. You have these well-formed neural pathways and it's like second nature. Yeah. In the episodic memory, you can think back to a time when you asked an open-ended question, and I invite you to do this. You ask somebody an open-ended question, what do you want, even is a great open-ended question. I remember one of the first times as a coach, I asked that question. It blew the person's mind. There was such an amazing response, which was quite surprising. And I can still feel that and remember it. That's because in our episodic memory, we have emotions associated. And then in semantic memory, now open-ended questions, I know that if I want to ask an open-ended question, it needs to be not a closed-ended question. So that means asking a question starting with what or how. These are the cognitive semantic facts that help me learn what is an open-ended question. So you see, all those three areas are useful. You can't have just one usually. Let's get a little more detailed about it. So this long-term storage, and I'd love to have some examples of this. What have you learned, consciously learned, you've practiced, and you know it's second nature? Why don't you just share in the chat box? What are some things you have? The body memory, whether it's riding a bicycle, asking open-ended questions, or using certain apps or functions on your phone. If you can come up with some examples, that'd be great. Or you could come up with examples of things you've helped people learn, so they become second nature. Driving, absolutely. Playing tennis, yes, the more you practice something like tennis and you do skill drills and serving drills, the more you do that, the easier it is, the more automatic it is. swimming, playing drop shot in squash, having my keys before leaving the house. I love that one, Jeanette. You have to remember it, you know, and for a while, if you've been forgetting your keys, you might need to say, where are my keys? Have a note that says, where are my keys? Great. Stephen Light, eating muffins. We could probably talk a lot about that. Baking, writing. Thorsten's loving the keys. Yeah. Learning English. Yeah, learning a language. Practice, practice, practice. I'm horrible at learning languages because I'm too shy to practice. I learn it cognitively, but I'm not very good at actually the episodic and experiential part. I just hate it, getting feedback, right? So here we are, basal ganglia. That's what our slide is saying. Long-term storage. You've practiced these things, you know them, you don't have to think about them anymore. They are in your body, and the way you got there was through practice, practice, practice. And so if you are helping someone learn something, this is the goal. You want it to be in this second nature place. You know, it's a choice. If you want them to be good at it, you want them to be really competent at it, you want them to be an expert, and you want it to be second nature, they need to practice, practice, practice. That's what has it get stored in long-term memory. Now, if you're relearning something or they are relearning something, it really needs to be practiced more than the old habit. So let's say you're learning tennis and you're learning a slightly new way to serve. If you had an old way of serving that was very innate and second nature, that's going to be the thing that tries to come out. But you have to keep practicing the new way more. You can't practice, you know, a new way once and the old way 10 times. You'll never learn the new way. So there's got to be some discipline around learning the new way of tennis or asking questions or swimming or whatever it is, or eating muffins. There's, you know, practice, practice, practice the new way. And there's a discipline around that. It takes energy and focus. And because of that, it's not easy to learn 10 things at the same time. So one thing at a time. If you're really trying to learn something, try one thing at a time. So that's what long-term storage in basal ganglia is all about. Let's move on to episodic memory. So you want to learn something new. I'm just going to keep going with tennis serves, if that's okay. So somebody has taught you how to serve, and you've gone through, I love playing tennis, you know, you've gone through the motions and you've got your whole body experience, and somebody's taught you how to do the whole dance. For me, serving tennis is like a dance. You know, you go through that whole thing and you get that experience in your body, and you can feel it, and you can have that feeling of when you hit a really great serve. And you recall that with that feeling. It's important to recognize that these feelings come with the experience, because if you're teaching or you're helping people learn, you've got to be aware that these experiences and all their feelings are going to be stored with how to do that thing. So if you are critical and critical and critical, and they feel shame or blamed or guilty or wrong, that's the feeling that's going to be stored with their experience. So if you're a tough cookie teacher, you're going to have people learn through fear. Now, learning through fear can be great. It can be super powerful, but it's not the best way to go all the time. It's not really sustainable. You don't want, if you're going to touch a hot stove top or a hob that's been on, you might want to say, that's hot, don't do it, or you'll have the experience of burning yourself. I've burned myself a couple times lately, and I'm super cautious now about that. But those are more exceptions. And we learn from failures, of course. But if you're setting someone up to learn, try doing it through setting them up for success, because as they have this experience of doing whatever it is you're teaching them, whether it's a tennis serve or any of those other things, if they have a positive experience with it, they feel good about it, that's what's going to be stored with their experience. And when they go to do this thing the next time, they refer back. You can refer back to this experience. Out comes that feeling of what it felt like, both physically, the serve or the asking the question, and the emotions come with it. If there are positive emotions stored in there with that experience, they're going to be more motivated. I would love to hear your thoughts. If there's any thoughts you have about that, add it on the chats. For me, when I learned that, it was sort of mind-blowing. Like, oh, okay, that's why we don't want to just shame people. I knew I didn't like that way of learning, but I also didn't know at the time why that is. There's a very good brain reason. Yeah, don't see any. If there's any comments, we'll come back to those. So think about the situation where you are going to be helping someone learn something. How do you set them up for success? Sure, they're not going to be perfect, but there might be things they do well. So how do you reinforce that? So it's a positive reinforcement. You're doing that well. Sure, you want to correct them, but not through shame and blame. Just like, here's the way, this part is working. And now here's what else you need to add to that. You can do it. That kind of positive thing. Set them up for success and have them feel, yes, I can do it. Even if they're not perfect, that's okay, because they're learning and they're going to practice, practice, practice. And also in practice, it's helpful to get feedback, what works and what doesn't, without the blame and shame. So they keep learning, and that keeps them motivated to learn as well. Right, let's see what people have said here. I was most interested when I was a kid to learn things when I was seen as good. Absolutely. And you start being good at something and then you start being better at it. Maggie says, cultivating appreciation and gratitude. Absolutely. Karen Alley, small chunks with positive feedback. Exactly. Let's see. Great example of tennis reminds me of Timothy Galway's theory. Absolutely. I was thinking about Timothy Galway actually just a moment ago. Can you explain a little bit of the neuroscience of these two concepts? I'm going to come back to that when we do Q&A. And yeah. Great. These are great examples here. Small chunks, positive feedback. When you've learned things in a positive environment, and when you've been shamed and blamed and probably found it hard to learn. That's all we're trying to do, is like trying to get it so that you have positive experiences for the person that you're teaching or training. Okay. The other great thing about, the other important thing to know about experience, this episodic learning, is that, we associate with positivity for all the reasons I've just talked about, and you're starting to begin those neural pathways. So it's the beginning of solidifying. It's just the beginning. So you want to teach people in the right way, to get things going in the right way, and build on them. And that's what they can build on as they practice. The other thing I want to say about this, I've chosen a picture of a child who's having a good time. So another reason for positivity is that when you're under threat, your brain, it's like it clamps up. So a happy brain learns better. When you have positive chemicals going on, some dopamine, some positivity, your brain is more open. I actually read an article on this the other day as a research paper, and I don't remember the percentage, but it was something astronomical, like you're 70% more open to new information when there's positive chemicals in your brain. That number might be high, but that's the number I remember. Huge difference between having a positive learning environment and having a strict, kind of learning environment. So that's another reason to have positivity along with the learning process. All right, let's go to our third memory type, which is semantic memory. I didn't put that word on here. Semantic memory is the third type, semantic meaning words, and it's about data and facts. And you don't want to have only data and facts, like old-fashioned lectures. Here's a bunch of information, now go do something with it. But some is good. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're learning open-ended questions, it's helpful to know what is the structure of an open-ended question. What is this, if you're learning this tennis serve, there might be some facts. Here's where your balance needs to be. Okay, I need to have my, left foot here, my right foot there, and my body in between. Facts are helpful. I had this, somebody in a training program, I was doing Neuroscience of Learning program, and he was learning to ride a unicycle, and I kept talking about experiential learning. And he said, I got this unicycle as a gift, and I was trying to learn it just by trying, just by doing, and I couldn't do it. And then I read the book. I read a book about how to ride a unicycle successfully, and that's when I learned how to do it. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. But if you had only read the book, and then gotten on the unicycle without any other practice, it's not likely you would have had that success the first time, maybe, but it's the practice that really makes it work. So data is great, information is great, but it's not enough. So think of information as a support. It's also great to provide some information. Here's why we're going to learn this. So it gives people a purpose and a reason. So mnemonics, models, and there's a lot of stuff that we all do that usually involves models or some kind of way to remember the steps of something. And that helps people to remember what to do. Yeah? Good. So recall someone who helped you learn, whether it was a parent, complicated things going on with parents, but use parent if you want, a sibling, a teacher, a manager or leader, a professor, somebody that was really helpful in helping you learn something. Maybe you were struggling with a physics problem and you went to the professor or the teacher and was like, how do I do this? And the way they talk you through it was really helpful. Or perhaps it was something about learning coaching skills or playing tennis or whatever. Think about a situation where someone was really helpful. And consider what made it great. What was it about that person? Was it attitude? Was it their come from? Was it their tone of voice? Was it the language? Was it how much they challenged you? How much they respected you? There's usually some balance between support and challenge. And the person feeling that demonstrating that they know you can, and also helping you go through the steps. That's typically. So let's hear some examples, if you would. So I'm just reading, Arona, your comment, but if you would put some things in the chat box about what this person did that made your learning experience great. So there was encouraging, positive, and hopeful. I believed I could do it. Support and challenge, balance, tone warm, belief of the teacher. Great. Being honest and straightforward with compassion and encouragement. Straightforward, yeah. Effective learning, asking questions, absence of know-it-all, presence of what do you think? How would you try it? So allowing you to take ownership. Great. So I'm going to get more. I'm just looking at these. So English teacher, visionary. That's great. Keep those things going because you'll be talking to each other about them in a few moments. So here are the tips. A few tips. Safety first. So as much as you can, eliminate judgment and shame. Now, I think one of the tricky things is the better you are at something, the harder it is to understand someone who's completely new at this thing. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about this. I'm trying to remember the exact situation where like somebody learned something when they were like starting 5-10 years old. It was a client the other day. It was like totally innate, felt innate, this thing that he had learned. Because he was he learned this. So I'll give you an example. This guy, a client of mine, he learned how to talk to people and network and be open and go to a networking event. Sorry, it wasn't 5-10 years old. He was actually 18. Go to networking events. It was a political, he was learning to be a politician, actually. He didn't become one. But he learned all of these skills about how to network and talk to people and open conversations from a cold start. And he uses these as a manager and a leader and a salesperson. And part of him thinks that this is just innate. Doesn't everybody know that? Because he learned it when, 25 years ago. And if we're really good at something, we probably learned it quite a while ago and we think it's innate and natural, and doesn't everybody do this? So those are the tricky parts. How do you recognize your own expertise? And if you are teaching your own expertise, you need to break it down and figure out what is it that I do when I'm doing this thing, rather than just go, can't everybody do this? Look, it goes like that. So recognizing your expertise. and creating safety for the other person and really meeting the other person where they are, eliminating your own judgment and shaming of them. Like, shouldn't you do, you should know how to do this. And I just want to say it's harder to do if you are a super expert at something. And if you want to learn something, it's great to teach it to others, because you learn a lot in that process, and it's easier because you don't have to, go through that whole thing of how do I get back to that learning place. Okay, positivity, happy brains learn better. So how do you propose fun experiences, opportunities to learn? How do you make it light? How do you make our hesitation to learn normal, just normalize concern and fear, and be with them, be on their side, like same side of the table with them. It's like, yeah, that's great. And oh, like this, and just positive and happy. Even if you can see they're really, really got a long way to go, you need to keep it happy and positive. And then there's making it real. So learning something in the context in which you're going to be using it is most helpful. But even role plays where you're not in the context where you're using this thing are still helpful, because it still builds neural pathways. So if you're a coach or a leader and you're working with somebody, helping them learn a particular communication skill, for example, like this guy I was talking about, he's going to go help his team learn these communication skills. A really great thing to do is to practice and role play. And I know people go, ooh, role plays, I hate role plays, but they're really helpful, because the brain doesn't know the difference between a role play and the real world. The brain that's learning doesn't know the difference. The emotional brain that goes, I'm going to look weird, is a different thing. So we can get over that part and go into, let's just role play, because you practice. Like the tennis serve, you got to practice it a bunch of times without playing a game. And it really helps. So that's kind of like a role play. So how do you set up an experience? If you're working with communication skills, for example, how do you be the person to practice with? So help them learn how to ask open-ended questions, and then have them practice with you and create a conversation so that they get to be in the learner seat, actually doing and making it as real as possible. So we're at a networking event. I've never seen you before. You're going to come up to me, and we're, that kind of thing. I think you know what I mean. So make it real. And then practice. Help them, as I said earlier, if you're learning and relearning something, you've got to practice the new thing way more than you allow yourself to do the old thing. Okay, so those are some tips. Safety first, keep it positive for the experience. So safety first, to keep the brain in a calm state. Positivity, to keep the brain in an open, happy state, to get the chemicals going that really work so they can be stored with those experiences. Make it real so it's memorable and relatable, and help them practice. Those are the tips. We're going to put you in a learning group, a conversation group, small groups of 3 to 4 people. I believe Frodo's getting that set up at the moment. Here's the questions for you. So in breakout rooms, in your groups of 3 to 4, it'd be great if you'd write these down. We can possibly put them, I'm not sure we're ready to put them in chat, but if you could just grab them, grab some notes on these. How do you create safety first? Reduce judgment and shame. How do you create a happy brain situation so people learn better, creating positivity? And how do you help them practice? What does that mean? Having accountability is really helpful. As a coach, I thought accountability was so boring. But it's like, yeah, go do that thing. I trust you, and that wasn't helpful. It is really helpful to have accountability. So you're going to go practice, come back and tell me how it is, with excitement, not a parental kind of like, when are you going to do it? But great, let's check in 2 days or in a week, or you're going to go to that, event, and, let's check in. So you can still keep it positive, but accountable. People are way more likely to practice and do the thing they said they were going to do if someone else knows. You know that about yourself. If you tell yourself you're going to do something, you know how likely you are to do it. But if you tell someone else you're going to do it, you're more likely to, right? So that's the key about accountability. It really helps people keep in practice. So these are some questions for you. You've got 12 minutes. Yeah, you'll have 12 minutes in the breakout room. Frodo will be sending you a message when there's a couple minutes left, and there will be a countdown clock. So pay attention to that countdown clock. Feel free to come back early if you want. There's always a way to exit the room. And if you're aware of that countdown clock, you know when the room is going to be closed. It's so shocking for people when those rooms close. So just watch the countdown clock and be aware of that so you don't feel like you get a whiplash when you come back. Okay, off you go. 12 minutes. Have a great conversation with your group of 3 or 4. Hope you've got your questions. And you should be seeing, I believe everyone has a note to go join your room. So please hit the join button and you'll go join a room. And I'll see you in 12 minutes. And I see Philippe, do you see the join button? And Jean, looks like you're here too. Jean, you're on an iPhone. Sometimes iPhones don't like these. So let us know, Jean, if you don't have a join button. And if you want to talk to me during these 12 minutes, that's fine with me. So what I'm going to do for the people on YouTube is I'm going to talk to you about other types of learning. Why not? So in this webinar so far, we've been talking about mostly a one-to-one situation. How do you help an individual have a great learning experience? And so for groups, why don't we just expand it to groups? Since you're here and maybe there's some trainers or coaches, or maybe you work with teams and you're helping your whole team. If you're a leader in an organization or even a coach who works with teams, how do you help set this up so that teams can learn well together? And I'm going to back up on my slides and actually go back to the beginning and just do a real quick run through of 3 types of learning, 3 types of memory in the sense of a team. So long-term memory, maybe there's interactive things that a team is going to do together or a group is going to do together. Similar to the individual is they need to practice together. If they're learning how to be kind to one another or positive with one another, they need to practice that more than being toxic together. So if you are in a learning group with them, that's something you can watch out for, is help them practice the new way together. We have a social brain. We learn together. We learn really well together, and we can practice together, and we learn habits in our relationships. So help people develop good habits, but interpersonal habits. Practice, practice, practice. Episodic, again, is about practicing something with knowing that there's an emotional aspect to it, and that's stored together with the thing we do with the emotions. So if you have a group of people, a great thing to do is have them have a positive experience together. Set it up that way. Don't set them up for a failing experience. Set them up to have, even if it's just a small step that you're having them take together, to be kind together, be positive together. Set it up so they succeed. Don't ask them to talk about their biggest fear together. Have them approach something that they can get their minds around, in a I want to say in a small way, something that's very approachable for them, and just create a positive experience. That'll build trust with them. It'll help them have positivity, but they will remember it, and they will remember being positive together and be willing to do the thing again. If you're always putting them through challenges, then that's what they'll remember. If they're fear-based, when they're together, they will continue to be fear-based. That's what they'll store in their memories. I see we've just got somebody new, Malika Charmini. Hi there. We've got breakout rooms that are working together at the moment, talking about learning. And what I'm doing, because we've got YouTube people, is I'm just talking to the YouTube streaming people who don't have the opportunity to go into rooms, and I'm talking about learning as a group. It's your choice. If you want to go join a group, my tech guy will put you in a group. If you want to stay here, that's fine too.
Yeah, I've been watching you on YouTube because I couldn't log in. I was required a password and I didn't have a password. So because your your emails end up in my spam filter, so I have problems. So
Uh,
I've been watching you until now. I wouldn't
Okay.
mind going into a breakout room if you can find one for
great.
me.
Frode, can you add her to the breakout room?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. And you need to hit the join. Yeah. So I was talking about groups having a good experience together. You give them a good experience, they will remember positivity. They'll want to be together again. They'll want to do that thing together again. And it's essential that you have this positivity if you really want them to be motivated to do it again. And of course, you offering them some factual pieces of information will be helpful. We do these steps when we're together. They might even build their own factual base. Right, when we're in this space, we're working on that thing, we need to remember this and that and that. And that can be really helpful that they create it together. So just running through these slides again, basal ganglia, long-term storage, as they practice, they build it in their collective consciousness. You have episodic memory, so you're creating a fun environment so they can have something positive to do together and they'll remember it. And then you have some data or a model or something to support. So that's for teams. And I'm just thinking about some other things. I'm going to go back to my tips. So these tips for teams: safety first. If you have a team or you have a group, let's say you have a new group that's forming. Safety first is really essential. People come in and people's brains have this friend versus foe mode that they're in. Foe is an enemy. And if they don't know someone, the brain is more likely to think, what's wrong with that person? So it's really helpful to have some kind of introductory exercises. This is why we do icebreakers in group activities, is because it helps people get through that and helps them get to know and feel the warmth of somebody else. So having a positive question as an icebreaker is really helpful because it gets them into friend mode and it creates safety. And if they've got safety, then they feel open enough to try something. And if you're again, you're having a training, you want to make it experiential and set people up for success. So that's the positivity and knowing that happy brains learn better. And of course, making it real is also relevant for teams. How do you create a scenario or a situation that is as real to their real situation as possible? Maybe you want to do a little step. If they're a team and they're working towards meeting a customer that's really aggressive, perhaps, you don't want to throw them in there with some really aggressive people. You want to start with, what can they do? What can they do together? Joy Stern, I noticed that you just joined here. We've got people in breakout rooms. If you want to be in a breakout room with people, I think we have just a few more minutes. Just put a note in the chat box to the whole group is fine. And you'll go into a breakout room. Otherwise, I'm just talking about learning in teams and groups. And I was just coming to the end of what I wanted to say. And I think we've got about 3 or 4 more minutes left. Frode, could you give me a time of when the breakout?
We have 5 minutes left in the breakout room.
5 minutes left in the breakout room.
Okay, sure.
So Joy, do you want to be here or you want to be in a breakout room?
I'll go in the breakout.
Okay, great. Frode will put you in a breakout room.
So I join.
Hit the join button, yeah. Have a great conversation. Great, I've got 5 more minutes. I was thinking we're about ending. So I just want to finish this. Making it real, so scenarios. There's some training that I do. We use scenarios all the time to create a situation that's relevant to practice the thing that we want people to practice as a team coaching situation. So we set up scenarios that will simulate the situation in which the person needs to practice a particular set of skills. If the situation, if we just say, let's go for a random situation and we want to practice this skill A, B, C, D, but the situation isn't relevant for that, it's really hard to practice that skill. So I also want to talk about the social aspect since I've got a few minutes. Social learning is really important. There's another program that I've designed and delivered for some years, and it's about co-facilitation. And people join that program in pairs because they're learning co-facilitation. They're really learning to develop their the relationship with their co-facilitator and learning how to co-facilitate together. And we get such great reviews on this program, and a lot of people have really great experiences. And of course we thought, well, it's our great design, right? But I finally realized that one of the reasons that this program is so powerful is that people are learning together. There's this intense learning experience in pairs. These people get to know each other really well. They're set up for success. There's a lot of positivity. They fail together, they succeed together, they survive together, and it creates such bonds with them that they end up loving what they're doing. And it's as much about their relationship, or perhaps more about the relationship and the positivity that got created with them. So their brains are open with all the positivity and openness. They're trusting someone, and they're also talking together, which is another part of learning. As you talk through something, it helps solidify that learning in the episodic and semantic learning areas. So that's part of your learning. If you look at adult learning theory, having a conversation is important. So you go and you have an experience, and then you reflect on it, and you have a conversation about it. The language in the brain, the language center is very closely associated or set near these semantic and experiential learning centers in the hippocampus. They're very closely related, and they talk to one another. So once you have language about something, it helps you remember. So if you have social learning, so in this pairs situation, they're always talking through their learning, which helps them solidify learning. In other learning programs that we have online learning. Boy, do we love online learning where people can be self-paced. But there's so much more learning available when people are in small learning groups, like the people on this call right now. Social learning is really helpful because you talk about it. You have good feelings with other people. You feel like you belong to the group. If there's safety first and there's positivity in the group, it creates more positivity, a sense of belonging, and it has the brain be open, and it helps solidify learning because you're having dialogue. So if you do any kind of virtual program or online learning or self-paced learning, please make a social learning aspect of it. Have people meet together, create social groups, whatever you can do to have people interact together. And we've got a minute left, I'm noticing. So it's that interaction and people enjoy it. And it's most likely when people come back from this learning group, that's happening right now, they'll be in a positive, usually they'll be in a positive frame of mind because they've been talking with like-minded people. And we like talking with like-minded people. So that's a big part of learning as well. And on the one-to, I'll probably say this again when they're back, and the one-to-one learning situation, also if you can have the person reflect and talk about what they've learned, that will be really helpful for them. And maybe they find other like-minded people that they can relate to or learn from, share best practices. That's a great expression to use. Connect with these other people and share best practices. How are you applying this in that situation? How are you applying it in that situation? It creates more possibilities. And people are coming back from the breakout rooms. Welcome back. Hope you had a good conversation. I'm just looking at some of the things. I've been talking the whole time you guys have been gone. I'm just looking at some of the things to answer questions about. Great. Let's see. Is everyone back? Frodo, is everyone back? I've lost my slides. So I'm going to assume everyone is back from the learning groups.
Yes, they're all back.
Great. Thanks. Any top tips that anyone wants to share, either verbally or on the chat box? Just brief one-sentence top tips that you learned or something you appreciated about your learning that you learned in your learning group. your breakout group. Anybody want to share? Roger, looks like you're talking, and
I'm sorry, I was talking, but I was gagged myself.
so you're
We
ungagged
thought-
now.
Laughter lubricates learning.
Oh, love it. Laughter lubricates learning. Absolutely. Create some humor, create some laughter, opens the brain, creates positive chemicals. People connect better in that place.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So does that make us your top group? Laurie?
Absolutely.
'Cause
You win the prize.
that's what we wanted, because we also think prizes encourages positivity.
Prizes encourage positivity.
Prizes promote positivity. There you are. We
Laughter
like
lubricates
alliteration in
learning.
our group.
You're the alliteration group. That's fantastic.
I'm going to mute now because I've spoken too much already.
Okay, thank you, Roger. And forgive me if it feels like I'm challenging you on the prizes. I sat in the back of a group once where there were prizes given out and there were tables of group. And this one table was always the table that got the prizes. And they were definitely motivated and engaged. And the other tables were like, stopping trying. So if you're going to give prizes, please distribute them and set everyone up for success and make sure that there's prizes all around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I say something about prizes?
Sure.
In a talk that I gave the co-presenter, what she did is she brought chocolates, and when someone would respond to something, she also had played softball, so she had a very good pitch, and she would throw the piece of chocolate to the person, and it was distributed. It wasn't all to one person or people only at one table. It was as people would respond to questions or make comment, she would throw a piece of chocolate.
Yeah. Great. As long as it's distributed and you don't get all the room revenging against the one smarty pants in the room.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Prizes, positivity, whatever creates positivity all around the whole room and in between people. Any other top tips? Use metaphors. Henry is saying use metaphors. Henry, would you like to say a little bit more about using metaphors?
Yeah, in our group, we thought that, using metaphors, things that are familiar with people, you start from where they are.
Yeah.
And metaphors may be a safe way of doing that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like creating from their own world and their own metaphors, and fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for that. Good. Any other, I'm looking, let's see. No failure ever, just learning. Home fun, not homework. It's great. And just a comment on the no failure ever. It's up to you whether you want to call something a failure or not, but take the stigma away from failure, and certainly take it away from you made a mistake and you are a failure, because you want people to be like, I'm a learner, not a failure. Any other, and normalize that. Babies, when they learn to walk, they don't just stand up and walk, they try and try and try, and they get up and they bounce and they fall over. And they get up and they try and they fall over. And that's a natural learning process. And actually, it's great to watch kids as they learn to walk. They mimic one of the most natural ways of learning is to mimic. So another tip that I hadn't thought about as I was preparing this is to demonstrate. So if you demonstrate what it looks like in a way that they can copy, that will make it easier for people to, they can mimic you. What I've seen is sometimes people demonstrate something and it's so amazing and so extraordinary that people can't copy it. So if you're, you want to have a tennis serve that people can do themselves, or a open-ended question, or whatever it is that you're teaching them. So modeling is really useful. Let's see. Questions. I have a couple of questions here for to set this up for me. Oh, we love this. Andre Agassi has a book called Practice, Practice, Practice. That's wonderful. An incredible neuroscience story. I'll have to get that. Let's see, there's, please talk about correcting someone to do something better or differently. The example with tennis, holding the racket correctly. So in one of the programs that I run, we have a trio of expressions called find right, reaffirm, redirect. And that's all about creating safety and positivity. So if somebody's holding a racket incorrectly, they're probably not holding it 100% incorrectly. So you want to find out what people are doing well. So find them right. So I notice you're holding, the grip at the right percentage away from the end of the racket, or I notice that you have the right intention around the questions that you're asking, or the type of, you've got intention there to find right. You've got a whole body, you've got all kinds of things that you can find right. And that's partly a discipline on your part to look for what's right. We have error detectors in our brain that go, what's wrong? And just focus our attention very intently on the part that's wrong. It's very easy to only go to the mistake. So you, as a trainer or teacher or coach or leader, broaden your looking as what is right. So reaffirm that all this stuff is working, and a little tweak for you. Hold, turn the rackets 3/4 or 1/4 of a turn. Hold it this way as you swing. Just a small correction. So the three things of find right, reaffirm, here's the intention of what we want to be doing in this situation, or here's why we do things this way. And here's the little correction, the redirection of what you need to do to get to better, as opposed to that, that's horrible, do it like this. Okay. There's a question about Timothy Galway's theory about inner teller and doer. I actually don't know it, so I apologize. I can't explain. I don't know, some of Tim's work, but not about the teller and doer. Certainly his inner game. I don't want to go too far on that because I might go off in the wrong direction. So apologies for that. I don't have the answer to that one. Any other questions you want to add to the chat box? Photocopies them over to a special place where I can see them, or any other comments anybody wants to make? Because I want to tell you about our program that we're offering, which I'm very excited about, unless there's any other questions. So let's shift our attention, if you will, if you'll stay with me, about Rewired to Relate. So we have a program that we've been putting together. Gosh, have we been putting this together for decades, or we've been putting it together for 6 months or 2 years? Who knows? It's a compilation of a lot of things we know about the brain and about how we work well together and how we don't work well together. This isn't a program about learning. It's not a program about learning, but we use everything we know in the design of the program. But how to create positivity, how to create experiences, social learning. This is an online program, but we run it with cohorts. We don't want people running it on their own because we actually don't believe it's as powerful as a social learning experience. Well, you guys were in breakout rooms. I was talking to the YouTube people, and I was talking a lot about social learning because you learn a lot when you talk about what you're learning. There's a reflection phase of learning that's really important. And so if you have a social group that you're working with, you talk about the learning. You go try something, you talk with your group about it, you hear best practices from each other, you share what you learned, what worked, what didn't, where you failed, where you succeeded. All of that helps you solidify your learning, and that social learning is really important. So in our programs, that's one of the things we emphasize, whether we're running this in-house or an open enrollment, as we put people together. I assume that you enjoyed the conversations together, the 12 minutes you had in these groups. Most of the time I get feedback about that. Really loved that, loved talking with other like-minded people. It's the same thing for this learning program. So Rewired to Relate, it's about learning about the social, emotional brain and how we trigger each other and how we can calm ourselves, use well-being to get ourselves in a calm, cool, collected state so we can use the best part of our brain. And so we call it brain training for working well with others. It's about learning how to create a safe environment where others can learn and thrive, where others can work well together, where others can collaborate. It is step one towards a leadership program. This itself isn't a leadership program, it's for everybody. So team members can learn how to work well with one another and create great, open, productive, possibility thinking, innovative groups. and be a part of that and give feedback without hurting each other. So it's a lot about positivity, motivation, and of course, in those situations, you can turn any situation into a learning opportunity. Here's a couple of details about it. We have one open group starting next week on the 28th, that's Monday. It's a 5-week program. There's a launch webinar that's in person, that's live with me. And then there's 5 weeks of learning where you learn online and then work with the learning group to share your learnings. And there's 2 other webinars as support. One's a Q&A learning where we talk about the concepts all together as a whole big cohort, where during the 5 weeks you spend most of your time with a group of about 4 people like you did today. So that's our Rewired to Relate program. We're very proud of it. We've put so much effort into the content of it, the neuroscience content of it, as well as making it the best learning experience possible with interactive. So it's not just reading. We have things you can read and videos, but it's not just sitting there using your cognitive learning brain, the semantic learning. It's very interactive and use your episodic and practice, getting things into that basal ganglia as well. Great. In the chat box, Frode has put 2 links. So one is to our website, schutzsvensson.com. You can go there and see other things that we have other coach programs that we have on offer. And the bottom link is for the sign up for Rewire to Relate that starts next week. I think we have 3 spaces in that at the moment, I think. It's a group of 20, and I hope to see a couple of you there, or all of you, not this time, but we'll be offering it again in January, or perhaps sooner if the demand is high. Great, it's 5 minutes till. I would love to know if there's any other comments or questions, kind of open this up a little bit to a bit of a conversation. Any questions about Rewire to Relate or about learning? Thanks, Maggie, for that. You're welcome. Anybody want to talk to us about Andre Agassi's autobiography and the neuroscience, or anything goes? We've got 5 minutes. It's a social time. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing and see if people want to turn on videos and have a conversation.
Lori, I asked a question in the chat bar, and I apologize, my camera is not working this morning, about tips for creating the happy learning space. And somebody said, well, what did your group talk about? And we talked about perhaps meditating before to get into a really good place. I talked about Amy Cuddy's power pose and pumping ourselves up with music. What kind of tips can you share with us? We'd love some insights.
Yeah, sure. So if it's a group that's coming together for the first time and they don't know each other, people will come into a group with this, there's friend versus foe, friend or enemy. And you want to get people to be friends as soon as possible. So icebreakers, it sounds trite, but really they work. If you have a positive, fun icebreaker, maybe an interesting question, tell us something nobody knows about you, something that gets people to laugh or feel warm towards one another. Games are also great. I try to use a lot of games when I can, in different learning environments, things that are fun. And the things that you want people to learn are often not. So let me put it this way. If you wanted to teach somebody how to ask open-ended questions, for example, you don't have to sit down and have just a conversation. You could ask open-ended questions while playing a game, because the questions are still open-ended and you're still practicing them. Meanwhile, you're having fun and having the brain be really open. So in a way, you're doing 2 things at once, but you're taking away the intensity of I'm just going to sit here and we're going to have a conversation. Does that answer the question? Does that feel like?
Those are great ideas. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Jeanette. Any other comments, questions, thoughts, anything to share? Great learning experiences you want to share? Okay, maybe we should just say goodbye then. It's 2 minutes early. Many of you have other meetings you might need to go to. So I will let you go a couple minutes early. Thank you so much for coming. We love seeing you guys here. And thanks for the questions and the comments and having great conversations together. Hope to see you next time. We've got a series for autumn, or if you're in another southern part of the world for your springtime. We have 3 more coming up before the end of the year. See you around. Thanks.
Just 5 minutes, Lori, or 2 minutes. May I please? Just
quickly, yes. And I noticed Magda is here. I haven't seen Magda in a long time, so I do want to catch up with her.
Okay. If you want to catch up, then I will write you on LinkedIn. It's
right.
fine.